Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Welcome to another edition of the podcast, and this one delivers a very special guest. Joining me is Fox Sports, ESPN, and Big East Network sideline reporter Kacy Standohar. An hour-plus conversation that we unpack several things. Her trajectory in this business, becoming a sideline reporter and doing it the unconventional way, which I love, kind of a grassroots from the bottom up as she continues to blaze her trail and path in this industry, and you can't believe how she's done it up until this point. So definitely want to listen out for that, as well as getting into baseball, her favorite sport, which is mine, as we talk about the Cleveland Guardians, where she's from, the state of Ohio, but now living in Chicago. I'm sure there is a bit of a heartstrings being pulled when it comes to her allegiance and her favorite sports team. So we get to discuss that. Anything and everything happens to do with sports, even Caitlin Clark, the recent controversy surrounding her with the foul and getting preferential treatment of her being the face of the WNBA. We definitely get to uncover that as well, and many more things, which I'm sure you'll certainly find very entertaining. So without further ado, my conversation, Kacy Standohar, Fox Sports, ESPN, and the Big East Network, her trajectory in this business, and I'll catch you on the other side of this conversation. So Kacy, one more time, pleasure to have you hop on board to discuss your journey. And before we even get into that, I want to start off by asking you your love for sports. Where did it begin? Did it start when you were a little girl growing up in Youngstown, Ohio? Did it happen to come maybe a little bit later on? Kind of walk us through how your love for sports, especially with what you're doing now as a reporter, where did the genesis of that begin?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. I'm excited to do this. I know it's been a long time coming. I was super busy in May, but now I have some free time. So thank you for having me on, first of all.
My pleasure.
And my love for sports, I do think, started when I was a kid growing up in Youngstown. My father and my brother are big sports fanatics. My dad's a big sports collector, so he collects baseball cards, football, basketball, you name it. He has like a collection from his childhood that he's still, adding to in his adult life and throughout life. And then he played golf, baseball, basketball. My brother was the same way: golf, baseball, basketball, 3-sport athlete. And they were, successful in our hometown and good ball players. And I grew up playing softball and I loved it. But I think I just grew up in the Youngstown area and was like, wow, I love watching. At the time, they were the Indians, Cleveland Indians play, yes. Now the Guardians.
Yep.
And I just loved watching baseball, listening to Tom Hamilton on the radio, watching games with my dad. He would quiz us at dinners, like at restaurants, to keep the peace. And he would be like, who's the mascot for this college team? Or who's the mascot for this team? So I just kind of grew up loving it. And then I played softball for a bit, got involved with more dance and cheerleading. And then for a while I was a Columbus Blue Jackets cheerleader. And that kind of sparked it again for me, where I was like, I love being around arenas. I love being in games. I love being a part of this atmosphere. And I wanted to do more of that. So that's kind of how it evolved.
Interesting. And you mentioned that you also in the process became a Columbus Blue Jackets cheerleader. Mm-hmm. So I guess obviously skating around the ice, because of course that's the NHL team.
Yeah.
But my thing is, I'm curious because considering from the time you were a girl, and we'll unpack that a little bit too, especially with the Indians and their history, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But now the Guardians, of course. But right. Now when you mention being a cheerleader, so what was the time between being that young girl, growing up in a household with your dad and your brother, like you mentioned, mm-hmm. and then when it sparked again, becoming a cheerleader for the Blue Jackets, when in between did it click to the point where, I think I want to go this path to see if I could break into journalism or reporting? Or did that come after, considering that you mentioned that spark?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I thought a lot about that lately, kind of my trajectory. When students ask me about my journey, I'm like, I have to think about it. I was a journalism major in college. And I thought I wanted to be a news reporter or a news anchor. I was like, me on the 6 p.m. news on the billboard, like that's not going to be me delivering your local news. Well, I worked for a local news station for a couple years, and I found that it was very helpful for my career, but also very depressing. I mean, like
Wow.
local news can be,
Ugh.
it's a lot of violence, shooting, fires. It's a tough gig to do, especially in an area in Youngstown where, there is some crime. And so, but that could happen anywhere. And I just kind of was like, I can't do this anymore. I was working 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So I was producing the morning show, and the hours were tough because that's basically the midnight shift. So while everyone's awake and alert, you're asleep, and vice versa.
Right.
And that was tough on my just personal life. So, I kind of got out of journalism for a little bit and went into marketing and advertising, made better money, but still there was a part of me, I think, that I was like, you know what? I kind of missed the TV life. I wonder if I could get into sports. And because I know it's less depressing usually. I know there's been some crazy discourse this week about the WNBA that hasn't been pleasant, but yeah, and we'll get to that. But
yes,
I did find that sports was still satisfying that desire in me to be telling stories, to be doing TV, to be doing broadcasting, but it wasn't news. And so I was like, okay, I can make this work. So I was in Columbus. I worked for the Blue Jackets part-time as a cheerleader for them, which was a blast. They're a great organization. And then it kind of hit me. I was like, I think I want to move to Chicago. And I didn't really know anyone. I didn't really have a plan. And I just kind of took a job in marketing and advertising and social media, which was great. And I got to do some sports partnership work with them, and knew that I would kind of get there and just freelance on the side and kind of moonlight as a sports reporter and try to work my way back into the industry. So my path was not really traditional. Like, a lot of women and men in the industry go local, go regional, go national, whatever. I kind of bounced around a little bit, and I think there's really no cookie cutter way into this business, especially with podcasting and streaming and digital media, TikTok. Like there are so many ways to work in sports anymore. So I'm proud of kind of my weird path, but it's come with its challenges and it's come with, its triumphs too. So yeah, I kind of started freelancing here. No one was paying me. I was doing like small stuff with a local women's softball team that no longer exists. And they were the Chicago Bandits. And they were like, hey, we can't really pay you, but you can come and shoot stand-ups and do videos and interview players. And I was like, great, that's all I want to do. I just want to get involved. I just want to be a part of this. And I just want to get reps and get experience. And before I knew it, I was doing a lot of that. And then I started getting paid to do high school games. And then I started getting paid to do softball. And it kind of snowballed, domino effect from there, where, I was making sort of a name for myself in the Chicagoland area and doing more and more gigs and kind of building up my network.
Now, I love that story because that's the path that I'm taking myself, considering that I've been doing this for over 6 years. I've been doing this in some way, shape, or form for now almost 25 years.
Wow.
And it's a thing where as you try to blaze your trail or your path, and just to hear that, right, it's not as if, oh, well, in high school, I wrote for the paper, and then I went to college. I studied communications for 4 years, and then I started doing badminton and water polo and some of these other sports before you got to where you are. And one of the things that I want to ask, and there's several, but the first one that comes to mind was, considering that you've taken the unconventional route, was there a time or maybe even a period where you thought to yourself, all right, I trust myself, I know my hustle, I know that I'm going to make it, but was there a second or two where you thought, boy, this is as difficult as I could even ever imagine? Was there any doubt throughout that period?
Every day, still.
Wow. Interesting.
Yes. And I'd love to tell you that it's always roses and sunshine, but it's not. It's such a competitive industry. Yes, there are days in the beginning, especially when COVID hit. And I've been building up all this progress, and then COVID hit, and I was like, well, all the sports are gone. I guess that's it, and I did some streaming shows out of my apartment and tried to kind of keep up with it. but we weren't sure what was going to happen, right? Like we didn't know if sports was coming back. We didn't know when or how or what it would look like or who was going to get fired and what things would be. So that was very uncertain for me. And then even now, it's still kind of a roller coaster. I'm not going to lie to you. I try to be where my feet are and just say, I'm happy in this moment. I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm progressing, even though it seems small and it seems like it's taking a long time. I am proud of my progress, but yeah, there are days still where I'm like, is this going to happen? Because I think everywhere you're at, you're content and you're happy, but you want to keep building, right? Like I love what I'm doing now with Fox Sports, with ESPN Plus, with the Big East, with the PGA. Love it. But I'd like to keep building on that. And I'd like to keep moving up and do more regional work, maybe work for a pro team eventually. Because a lot of what I do is high school and college sports right now. So I'd never want to seem ungrateful, but of course we don't want to just stop, right? We want to keep building, keep growing. And there are days where it's really competitive and it doesn't make sense. And you get rejection and you get ignored, your emails get ignored. Like I'm sure you experienced that too. I know I'm not alone in this feeling.
Right.
But yeah, there are days where it was challenging and I was like, man, this is not for the faint of heart. And I tell students that too, because they're like, I want to be a sports reporter. And I'm like, are you ready to hustle? Are you ready to grind? Because this is not like, you don't just show up and talk for an hour on the mic. Like it is preparation, it is networking, it is grind, it is persistence. So there have been days where I have been maybe skeptical or unsure of what's next, but I pray about it and then something always comes up and I just kind of try to ride the wave of it.
And that's good. And then I was going to go to the flip side of that. So in those days where there may be some doubt or discouragement, what do you do to channel that to say, I've come this far, not to come this far? Because there's a flip side to that. And I'm grateful that you're sharing that because like you said, or as I like to say, everybody thinks that getting into this business where you have the networks that you're on or the certain people that you interview, that it's all coconuts and palm trees, that it's like, wow, look what Kacy's doing. This is great. But it's like, no, wait a minute. I'm in the muck. I'm in the grind. And not only that, but in those boring moments, just say to yourself like, all right, well, I'm just going to keep persevering. And of course, that's probably just your nature in your DNA. But what do you do to kind of switch that flicker to go on to say, I woke up to today. And even though as down as I may seem or feel, how do you do it to turn it around to get to the positive side?
I love the way you put that too, because that's kind of what happens, right? We are driven naturally. But I would say my family and friends and kind of close-knit group of people, my support system, they get me out of those little ruts where I'm like, oh my God, this is the worst. I can't do it, And I roll. And then they're like, oh, your pup, that's cute.
Yeah, that's a pup. All right, come on.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I find that when I go to them and say, hey, I'm feeling down today, I just sent my stuff out, but no one's getting back to me, and they're like, hey, keep believing, keep going. Your reel is good. Look at how far you've come. Like they remind me of that. And, I have a really good support system, mom, dad, brother, my boyfriend, my close friends. A lot of my close friends are in the industry too. They're either producers or social media managers or reporters as well. So they get it, right? It's like they understand that this is tough and that everyone's break comes at different times and it's challenging, but you got to keep getting up every morning. Sometimes I'll just look at myself in the mirror and I might be crying, I might be upset, and I'm like, no, you're going to send another email. You're going to wake up another damn day and you're going to keep going. Like, and it's ugly sometimes, right? But like,
oh yeah.
Because I think when we want something so badly and we're so passionate about it, it affects us in all the different ways, mentally, physically, emotionally.
Sure.
And we're driven. And it's like you hear those stories of like actors and actresses in their 40s where they have like $10 left in their bank account and then suddenly they get that dream role, right? Like, and everything just kind of clicks. And so you hope for stuff like that. But at the same time, I have heard from other mentors of mine that like little by little, I think it's Kate Scott that always says this. She's fabulous. She works for the Philadelphia 76ers. And she told me, and she says it a lot on her Instagram and stuff too. She says, little by little, one goes far. So it's definitely, I don't want to take credit for that, but she says, little by little, one goes far. Be you, do the work. And I kind of go back to that and go, she's so right. Overnight success is very rare, very rare.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So you have to kind of do that gradual, little by little, like Kate says. And before you know it, you look back and you're like, wow, look at all that stuff that I just did. Or look at how many podcast episodes I just recorded. Right. So I just try to remind myself of that and lean on my support system.
No, that's it's tremendous. And with that being said, because I know you mentioned ESPN, Fox, as well as the Big East Network. So now I'm curious, how are you able to get to that point where here it is, you're hustling, you're doing everything that you just explained, and then now you start to get those breaks, or you start to get those inroads with these networks where now you're becoming a little bit more public to people like myself and others who are watching you. If you could definitely share that journey to those networks and how that came about.
Yeah, thank you. I was doing softball. I told you up in Rosemont with the Chicago Bandits. And I knew that the Big East softball tournament was coming to Chicago. Every year it switches to a different school that hosts. So DePaul was hosting it. And I reached out to the Big East, to a contact or someone else I knew. And I just said, hey, I cover softball, would love to be more involved. I'm an up-and-coming sports broadcaster. If you need a reporter for the Big East softball tournament, I'd love to be considered. And I sent my reel. And they got back to me and said, yeah, we actually really like your softball experience. We'll probably use you for the Big East softball tournament. It's on the Big East Digital Network, but the last day is on FS2. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, finally, more consistent work, a gig that's linear on FS1 or FS2 that I was really excited about, and a chance to just get more exposure and do more of what I love. So that's kind of how the Big East relationship started. And they have a partnership with Fox Sports. So now when they have their championships, like I did baseball 2 weeks ago, that last day is on FS1. So it's been pretty cool to be kind of in the mix with Fox and Rush Media and the Big East Digital Network to kind of do these games and work with people like John Fanta and Paul Fritchner and a lot of these guys that are really good at what they do, especially with baseball play-by-play and analysts. So that's kind of how that I worked my way in there. And I'm so grateful for the Big East and just the partnership that I have with them, and just being able to have them trust me to do field hockey, softball, baseball, women's hoops. So that's been great. And it's kind of just getting connected to people. I reached out to Loyola, to DePaul, to UIC, different schools here in their athletic department. And I just kind of send my stuff and say, hey, if you need anybody, let me know. Would love to be a part of this. Wow. It's weird because a lot of times these jobs aren't posted, right? There's no job opening for that reporter position it's kind of like striking at the right time, a little bit of luck, a lot of hard work, and a lot of hustle. And I am proud that I hustle, because I think that that's what has gotten me this far is I grind, I hustle. I never let it get me down for too long. As challenging as that could be.
No, and that's fantastic, because just like you said, it's not as if you're going to go to Indeed or any of these other sites where they're going to say, hey, someone's looking for a reporter. They don't
often get posted. They sometimes do.
Oh, okay. Well, even still, you did it the old-fashioned way, where you cold call or shoot an email. And sometimes,
and it's worked. I mean, I called up UIC and I was like, hey, can I do a men's basketball game for you guys? And they were like, well, we have someone already, but he can't do this Thursday because he has a conflict. Are you free? And I was like, yep. And so it's kind of like, boom, right place, right time. You never know who's going to answer the phone and who's going to be looking for something right when you're looking.
And the crazy thing is that in this business, I understand it does take luck, but I also believe, and you're a testament to that, sometimes you create your own luck. And how do you create your own luck? By doing what you just did and what you explained. Yeah. So that's unbelievable. Oh, sure. You're welcome. Now, here we are, 2024, with everything that's going on, especially like you mentioned, podcast, streaming, obviously digital, TV, etc. Where do you see yourself? I know you're trying to almost fit in, and you have fit in all these different platforms. But if somebody were to, let's say, tell you that, what is it that you want, or maybe ask you, what is it that you would like to do day in, day out basis, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would love to be a sideline reporter for a Major League Baseball team, whether it's the Cubs, Royals, the Guardians, whatever. I mean, I'm in Chicago, so it'd be cool to work for the Cubs someday. And I think also I really love college football. So if I could do more college football for Big Ten Network or Fox Sports, whatever have you, that would be really cool. And that's something that I've loved. I think baseball and football are my favorite, but I'm also loving golf. I'm also loving, hockey. So open to whatever. I'm only 5'3", so I don't know if like the NBA is going to be calling me anytime soon.
They may have to put you on one of those, I guess, old milk crates or something.
Yeah, I have been on the Apple boxes before, and I know Tracy Wolfson's like my size, and she interviews like Zach Edey and all these really tall basketball players, and she's got to get on a step stool too. So, I would love to be working in Major League Baseball for a regional network or a team or college football. That would be kind of like the dream, if you will, or maybe like even MLB network. It'd be awesome, but I know that it's competitive, and I know the sports landscape is changing a lot with streaming and what are these regional networks doing, especially in Chicago. Like right now, they're launching an entire new network for the White Sox, the Bulls, and the Blackhawks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So basically, NBC Sports Chicago is going away in October, and they're starting this new network. So it's kind of a very unknown, weird time where people are like, okay, is everyone just moving over from NBC? What's the hiring going to look like? What are they going to be looking for? So definitely some big question marks still in the Chicagoland area. But I love being involved here. But I also know that for the right job, I would move. So that's kind of where I'm at and where I see myself in the next couple of years.
Interesting. Now, let me ask you this. Which one do you find challenging? And of course, both of them are challenging. But from the standpoint of sideline reporter, where obviously everything is coming in fast and furious, or just being behind the desk with another talking head or somebody that you're going to banter back and forth with, because again, you still have to be quick, you still have to be on your toes.
Sure.
Which one do you find more challenging, if they're either both the same or one is a lot more just daunting than the other?
That's a great question. I find that sideline reporting is very difficult. However, I've been doing it for 6 years, so I feel like I've got a hang of it, because you're basically running around making sure that your eyes and ears are open, that you're being the eyes and ears of what people at home can't see and can't hear. You're getting information for your producer or your play-by-play. Yeah, I got a shot of him over here. He's in this corner, or the kicker looks like he's over here, and he looks injured after that last kick, or whatever it might be. These linemen were talking, and I overheard them kind of in their huddle, and this is what I got from that. So you kind of get like interesting little tidbits from the game when you're the sideline reporter, like injury reports, special stories, and you got to be able to be alert, ask coaches good questions, ask players good questions. It's not just about the quarterback all the time. It's about what the defense is doing, what special teams is doing. So when I'm covering football, I'm kind of all over the place running around. And I do find that hard, but I think that I've got the hang of it. For me personally, hosting at a desk is a more challenging thing for me because I haven't done it as much.
Right.
So, and when you're hosting, you're kind of like, you even right now, you're running the show, right? You're kind of steering the ship and moving me along if I'm too long or if I'm too short or whatever.
Well, of course.
And hosting is that. You kind of have to steer the ship, get to the commercial break, get in the points you want to get in, make an impact statement, ask good questions to your analysts or to your other talking heads. So you kind of have to be this like different conductor, and it's a different muscle to flex. And that's something I want to do more of, but haven't had as many of those kinds of opportunities yet.
Now, you also brought up something interesting too, because I'm sure a lot of people, the fans at home that watch like myself, when they see the sideline reporters and they pop up, whether it's right before the start of a game, right before the half, at the half, etc., it's one of those things where we just see them come on screen, and of course they're going to detail someone's injured or this is what the coach told me, where obviously you mentioned, I'm sure you have to wear comfortable shoes on that sideline to go up and down the sideline, maybe even go in a locker room. Yeah, kind of take us through what that's like. And I understand you gave us a little bit of it, painting that picture. But let's say, for instance, somebody goes down with an injury. What is it that Kacy is doing at that point to try to get that information? Because I'm sure you got producers in your ears saying, Kacy, go to the locker room, or hey, go to the sideline, or hey, make sure you're by the tunnel and such and such. It kind of walk us through as to how that all unfolds when you're doing it in real time.
Sure. As soon as I see a player get injured, it's always scary, right? But I'm running in that direction immediately. I'm running around the sidelines to wherever that happened. And I stand back a little bit because you don't want to get in there with the trainers or whoever, medical staff, and be in the way, because that's not where you want to be. But you kind of stand back and you're just paying attention, right? Like so-and-so is holding his right knee, or, he seems to be experiencing some pain in his thigh. And it's a delicate situation because you don't want to report anything that seems over the top and scare the family. Like, say the family's watching at home and you're like, yeah, the left knee looks pretty bad. I think his leg might be broken. Like, you don't want to say that because you don't know that. So you kind of have to say he's experiencing some pain in his left knee. It looks painful. It looks like he is kind of trying to rub it out and ice it with trainers. Like, you're kind of just reporting the facts of what you're seeing. Yeah. That the other cameras might not be able to get, or no one else knows. And then when the time has passed, enough time has passed, but not too late, I'll go over to the trainer or someone on staff and I'll be like, hey, can you tell me about Bobby's injury or any update on him? And a lot of times they're like, no updates, sorry. And you're like, hey, I'm the reporter. I'm just trying to do my job and find out what's going on. I understand there's HIPAA rules involved. And then they'll say, yeah, he's going to be all right. We're going to ice him and see if it's broken, but he's expected to come back in, or he's going to be out for the rest of the game. Right. So you just deliver that report and you say, John, it looks like Jay is going to be out for the rest of the game. He is experiencing a lot of pain. Trainers are going to see if it's broken, do an MRI, but he's not expected to return. And that's kind of where you leave it. And so it's a delicate balance, and it's a weird thing to chase down someone who's injured. But you got to do it. That's part of the role.
Oh, of course. Without question. No, and that's interesting because as you were explaining that in the previous question, the first thing I thought was like, that's right. That have to be running around like chickens with heads cut off to get the information to try to convey it to everybody that's watching. So I can only imagine the type of pressure that you're under. And like you said, you've had enough reps to kind of, roll it off your back. But
I've learned a lot about it, especially like, if a player's not that hurt and his teammates come over and they're like, come on, man, we need you for this last quarter. Let's go. I'll report that. I'll be like, yeah. And his teammates came over and said this, and this. They're really trying to motivate him to get back in this game, guys, And so it can be light, but it can also be pretty serious too.
Oh, sure. Now, before we get to some sports stuff, the first thing I want to bring up as far as baseball is concerned, because I know you mentioned obviously with your dad and even with your brother as well. Now, to me, it's almost as if baseball seems to be a 20th century sport. Now, I love baseball. That's my first love. I'll talk baseball all day and night. And I find it fascinating that it seems to be that's your first love as well when it comes to sports. Definitely. Now, as far as the landscape, because everybody knows the NFL's king, understand rightfully so. Then you have probably college football, NBA. Right now, of course, it's going to be the NBA because they're into the finals, but college football is pretty much right there. And I feel like baseball is slowly but surely just slipping down the pecking order when it comes to sports. As someone who loves baseball like yourself, what do you think is the problem, considering that they've also changed the rules to speed up the sport? What do you think is the problem when it comes to media, when it comes to even the sports landscape as a sport that was once loved by many, but now it's almost as if kind of goes by the wayside?
It's a great question. It's so weird. It's like you will watch a random NFL game, even if you don't care about the teams, but you won't watch a random Major League Baseball game usually. Right. Like, yes, there's Sunday night baseball and there has been some good, exciting games. I do like the rule changes that were made in baseball. I am kind of a baseball purist, but I'm like, you know what? It moves it along. It gets more people excited about the game. The pitch clock is interesting. It keeps games moving fast. And I don't know. I don't mind the changes because I think it makes more people willing to sit through 9 innings and watch a game on TV. Now, it's hard for us to like see the problem because we love baseball so much. Right? Like, what do you mean you don't love it? Like, come on, it's the best. Yes. But I think people find it boring still. And I think the media is covering, it's kind of like the NBA. It's more about the players, right? It's more about the individual players. A lot of people I know don't like a baseball team. They follow certain players.
Right.
And athletes, and especially kids like millennials, Gen Z. they're following Mike Trout, they're following Shohei Ohtani, they're following the guys they like instead of the teams they like. So I think that's the media tries to like scramble and find ways to, combat that and deal with that. I don't know. It's interesting. I think I was at the MLB winter meetings and we were all excited wondering, where's Shohei Ohtani going to sign? Where's he going to go? Everybody kind of knew he was going to go to the Dodgers, but no one knew for sure. But really, like that whole time in Nashville during the winter meetings, almost nothing happened. I think the White Sox signed a guy that we were, looking into, and because I was covering it from a Chicago lens, but it was like crickets, right? And so you're just kind of waiting around. It's a baseball convention. It's meetings with GMs and coaches, and it's just kind of like, when is news going to break? Whereas when you're at the NFL draft or the NHL draft, it's like exciting. It's new. Everybody's moving around. There's a lot of, picks, and I don't know, baseball needs to find a way to be more interactive like that, to be more exciting. It's hard for me to say, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, first and foremost, you're right about the fans looking at it more from following players. And if that's going to be the case, why doesn't Major League Baseball market their players a lot more? And I get it that they're not the Patrick Mahomes of the world or the LeBrons. I get that. But you still have, like you mentioned, Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, and I get it that he's in a New Balance commercial. What about Aaron Judge? How about him? Aaron Judge only broke the AL home run rookie record a couple of years ago, won an MVP, New York Yankees. You would think that the sport, whether it be Madison Avenue or somewhere along the lines, that would just put this guy front and center for the whole world to see. And you even want to talk about maybe a Mookie Betts, or then of course there's a number of other players, and you even have one player, which I get maybe a lot of the people here in the United States may not gravitate to because of where he plays and even where he's from, because that could also be another thing why Ohtani, although it's wildly popular that he is, still maybe a lot of people don't gravitate to him because he's from Japan, is a guy like Jose Ramirez. Right. That guy is, I think he's Mr. Cleveland right now. He has to be.
Love Jose.
But he's a guy that can walk down the street and nobody would recognize him.
Right.
And that's my point. I feel as if Major League Baseball kind of dropped the ball there because we've seen the commercials with State Farm, the Chris Pauls, and so many basketball players, or even football for that matter, that they are in everybody's consciousness, whether it's football season or not. And with baseball, you may see a smattering of commercials, but you don't really get to.
Right. I didn't think about that. It's not enough out there in advertising and stuff. And I know they're trying to like do more with like the Major League Baseball TikTok creator class. And they were trying to, make social media more of a thing with baseball and the home run derby. And, but is it working? I don't know.
I don't think so, because even with baseball and all of its trials and tribulations over the last few years, and now that they're trying to speed up the game, and I've always, listen, even if it's a 4-hour night in the game, I get it could be laborious to watch, especially if you're at home, but still, I've invested in baseball for so long that it doesn't matter. It could be 10 hours, but you still have a bunch of stars that you could market. And not only that, but you have, I get it, there's the situation with the salary cap because it's so top heavy. And that's another question I was going to once we get into more of the sports realm. But so you don't have, let's say, Cleveland on the map, despite the fact that they're 40-20 in first place. So even the Kansas City Royals that have a young player in Bobby Witt Jr., but still not a lot of people here that watch sports, or even the casual sports fan, they don't know who they are. And that's where baseball has to step up. That's where I would think that they could have their platform, whether it is social media, whatever, TikTok, MLB, et cetera, to say, hey, these are the guys that people need to pay attention to, just like the NBA would look at the young player that's coming through college or is a first or second year player, or same for the NFL for that matter. They're everywhere. But unfortunately, because the sport isn't as popular as the NBA or the NFL, that's where it takes a big hit, because it almost feels as if nobody's really watching or even paying attention.
Right. No, that's a great point. I never thought about it like that. And we're in it, so we see it and we care. Like you notice like Paul Skeens for the Pirates and these guys, but like outside of that, people are like, who?
Right, yes. No, and that's the thing. And also with baseball too, the analytics, I feel like, and I can unpack that and talk about that for days, because Paul Skeens, we want to see him out there for minimum 7 innings. And I get it, he's just getting his feet wet, but hopefully as time moves along, that he's a guy that's going to be the horse that's going to pitch into the 8th inning, into the 9th inning, that it's not going to be a scenario where Paul Skeens, he's pitching a no-hitter, and granted, he did so against the Cubs in his second major league start, and I get it, he was already at how many pitches, so it's not as if he was going to go the distance, but I hope that once he gets length in his career, as he gets into his second, third year, and let's say he's throwing a no-hitter, and he may be at 95 pitches, and it's the top of the 8th inning, can we at least see whether or not that he's going to get to the 9th inning, even if he's at 110 pitches, that, now he's crossed the 100 pitch threshold, we're going to have to remove for the game. No, you're taking away possibly history by doing that. And therefore, that's where the fans like you and I will be aggravated. But for the casual fan, they'll be like, huh? Oh, he pitched a no-hitter and said, oh, okay. All right. And that's it.
Yeah, you're right.
So
true.
Yeah, so we shall see. All right, so now let's get into some sports, and let's talk about the Cleveland Indians in particular, or excuse me, the Guardians. I know I got stuck on the Indians before going back to, Guardians. Do you think they belong to me, I think there are only 5 teams that can win the World Series this year. I talked about that in my podcast last week. Phillies, Dodgers, Braves, even with Acuna hurt, Yankees, Orioles. Now, we can't underestimate what they've done. They've been phenomenal. They've played well above, I thought, and I picked them as an under this year when it comes to the over-under totals as far as Major League Baseball goes. Do you think they belong in that conversation, or is it way too early to tell?
I think it's too early to tell, right? Because in 2017, the Guardians had a 22-game win streak.
Yes.
And they still didn't end up. And that was the year after they went to the World Series. Right. Devastating year. I shouldn't say that very loud. I'm in Chicago, and which, I like the Cubs too, but I think it's too early still. We still have July, August, September to know, and 3 months, a lot can happen. Yes, they're the top of the AL Central. I love that they are a 40-win team right now and that they're hot right now. I love that they have pitching, even with Shane Bieber out. Like, I'm excited about this Guardians team, but I never want to get too excited, because when these teams make runs and then they kind of fall apart later in the season, or somebody gets hurt, you mentioned Acuna, so I don't know. I'd love to say they could be in the mix and get back up there again, because to return to like the Frankie Lindor form in 2016 and 17, where you're like, this team could do it. Yeah. I thought after he left and got traded, I was like, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen again. Don't know how it could happen, but they've struck something, right? They have a new manager. I do miss Terry Francona, but they have a new manager. They have new people in charge. They're a team doing a lot with just a little. They don't have as much of the spending as the other teams. I do like the Orioles too. I think they're hot. And so it's interesting to see kind of what will shake out, but I can't get my hopes up, man. I can't get my hopes up.
No, I totally agree. And even though you can look back to last year as the Arizona Cardinals, a team that was a wild card and sweeping the Dodgers and then being down 3-2 to the Phillies, having to do it on the road. And granted that they fell short by losing to the Rangers, but that's the one thing that I guess if baseball wants to hang their hat on, is hoping that a team like Cleveland, or even, let's say, in the NL Central, whether it be the Milwaukee Brewers, maybe even the Cubs for that matter, who knows, and not being among the powerhouses in the sport. Granted that they're not teams that, like Arizona, which they're not really on the baseball map other than last year. Hopefully they can make a run to show the big bad teams with the large markets, the big payrolls, that these teams obviously are in baseball for a reason. So I'm hoping that's the case.
I love the Dodgers, but I'm sick of it, right? I'm sick of seeing the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Astros and these same teams, in October. I'd like to see some other teams. And you think about even like the Kansas City Royals, they had a bad year last year, but they're 5 games back from the Guardians. Yeah. So I don't know. It's like baseball. That's why I'm like, why don't people love this? It's such a toss up every year. It's so weird every year. But again, it always ends up shaking down to, like you said, Yankees, Dodgers, Astros, and it's Phillies, we need Phillies. We need some new teams in the mix, and I would be excited to see somebody else get it done, even if it's not the Guardians or the Cubs. And my goodness, the White Sox are just having another terrible year.
Losers of 12 straight. I believe they had a 5-0 lead yesterday against the Cubs, and they blew that. Yeah. So, it is certainly tough sledding there for the South Side.
The crosstown series is always fun here. Getting the North Side and the South Side together. But I feel bad for the entire franchise and just some of the way that their games have ended. Like that game a couple weeks ago that ended infield fly rule, and there was
Against the
interference.
Orioles, yes.
I could not fathom that. I was talking to my dad about it. I was like, is this a bad call? He's like, it's a rare call because he didn't even see him,
Yeah.
So just unlucky for the Southsiders in the area. But man, baseball's the best, and it's just so fun. And I hope we get a nice Cleveland run here. That'd be cool.
No, absolutely. And they deserve it. They haven't won a World Series since 1948, and we know what happened in 2016. So, hey, this would be
the longest drought now. The longest drought for Cleveland. So I think they're due.
Yes, I agree as well. All right, so now I want to pivot to basketball. Obviously, the finals start tomorrow. Also want to get into what you mentioned earlier as far as the Caitlin Clark and what's happened there recently.
Sure.
But with NBA finals tomorrow, we know the storylines going in. Kyrie going back to Boston, although we've seen that movie before when he was a member of the Brooklyn Nets, going to play his former team twice in the postseason, 1-1 there. And now I guess this is the third time, considering that different organization I get. Luka's first trip to the finals. Kristaps Porzingis, is he going to play? Is he not going to play against his former team? So with the Celtics being a solid favorite, I won't say heavy favorite, solid favorite, and with Dallas having this run to the finals, what do you think is going to take place here? Do you think Boston, with the way they played here, not only throughout the regular season, but even in the postseason, just sweeping the Pacers and then the other two series in 5, where Dallas had a tougher stretch, tougher opponents, is that going to propel them maybe to have an advantage? Or do you think it's the Celtics and what they've done just being the dominant force and maybe getting themselves their 18th banner?
Yeah, the Celtics have the experience, right? And I'd like to see the Mavs get it done, though. I was interested about, Derek Lively and how he kind of, as a rookie, helped lead the team to the finals and was able to take a charge there and make a charge there, I should say. I don't know. I'd like to see the Mavs get it done. The NBA finals, NBA is probably like my least favorite, just because I feel like, for me, it's harder to watch. I don't know. I just feel like college basketball is a lot more exciting.
Yes.
But I don't know. I mean, Boston, I think Boston will take an early kind of like 2-game lead here. And then I'd like to see the Mavs kind of come back and kind of get in the mix. I don't want it to be like a total blowout. I think that'd be really disappointing, right? I mean, you don't want to see that, but I don't know. Who are you rooting for?
Well, my allegiance, as crazy as this is going to sound, I'm a Celtic fan that grew up in New York my whole life. And of course, I'm going with the safe pick of Celtics in 6. And I think the reason being is because 2 years ago, they went to a final, lost to Golden State. I think the experience from that point, even last year where they were down 0-3 to the Miami Heat, they came all the way back before losing a Game 7 in a conference championship. And then this year, with all the expectations, bringing in Porzingis, bringing in even Drew Holiday late in training camp, and winning 64 games in the regular season. I get it doesn't mean anything as of right now, but they've shown me something here in this postseason. Now, I don't trust them 100%, but I really do think that maybe the stars are aligned for them to win this year. Now, I go with the safe pick, but it is interesting to break down, because the other thing is that could this be 5 games? How could we argue that? Or even 7 games for that matter? I think it's easier to maybe argue for 7 based on what Kyrie and Luka and how the Mavericks have played here in this postseason and the tougher opponents. But then also because of the Celtic dominance this year and how they've been able to dispose of teams in the postseason, what would the argument be for 5? Now, I'm not asking you that. That's just something that I thought about, especially tomorrow on my next podcast as I break that down. But yes, it's easy to say, the Celtics in 6 because they may take that 2-0 series advantage like you mentioned, or even if it comes back to Boston 2-2, and then they win Game 5 at home and then they win Game 6 on the road. So, yes, I would think that the Celtics will win in 6, but I'm still trying to, for debating purposes, argue whether or not how they can win in 5, or could this go 7 games. So that's how I'm looking.
Fun if it goes 7. I don't think it will, but I don't know. I agree with you. I think 5 or 6 games sounds more like it. And I like Jason Tatum. I've interviewed him once for Fanatics Live, and I thought he was really interesting, really cool, like calmer guy than I thought he was. Like, he's very chill. And I know he's kind of in the mix for MVP as well. But I don't know. It's so tough because I think the Mavs have like a little bit more of like that fight in them, like that energy that they want it more. And I think sometimes that comes out in these games. And I don't know. I could see them kind of surprising the Celtics and Celtics fans. So
I would not be surprised. Yes, in that
what?
regard, yes, because I'm cynical, I'm jaded, especially when it comes to my team. So, would I be crestfallen? Of course, I would. But
Sure.
at the end of the day, would I say to myself, "Am I surprised?" Absolutely
Right.
not. So,
Right.
all right, so now let's turn our attention to the recent events here with Caitlin Clark, and obviously we've seen what she's done here throughout the last couple of years. Obviously, you have to give her props. And now being a part of the WNBA, which is really, I don't want to say put them on the map because we know the WNBA has been around for over a quarter century. But now you're getting all these different takes and all these different angles about the bump the other day. Was it intentional? Was there jealousy? Is it because all of the press that the WNBA and even Caitlin Clark is getting is because she's white? You have all these different narratives that are just being bandied about. And I get it. This is part of what we do as fodder for sports talk. But for you who, of course, follow the sport and follow what's going on, what is your take on what has transpired here over the last few days?
I'm disappointed in the Sky right now. I will say that. I'm disappointed in the Chicago Sky, how they've handled it. I just feel like at first when everyone was saying like, yeah, we do thank Caitlin Clark for putting our sport on the map, even though it's already on the map. We are thankful, but what do you want us to do? Like kiss the ring, bow down to her? I heard Elle Duncan say that, and she was just like, what else can these girls do? These women do. Like, they still have to go play their game, fight for a title, and do them. And I feel like we can't just sit here and be like, oh, thank you, Caitlin, forever. Like, yes, she's amazing. She came out of Iowa and just lit everything up, and has also been challenged in the WNBA and had a slow start. And now she's, doing well. I'm disappointed in the Sky because it feels like there's a bit of unprofessionalism and a bit of jealousy, and the comments are unnecessary. Like the whole comment of like, well, I think it was Angel Reese. She was like, well, I'm the reason people are watching too. And it's not just about one player, which is true. Right. But I think there's a better, delicate way to say that doesn't sound like you're bitter or jealous. I always, in sportsmanship, have appreciated kind of like the lack of celebration. I know that kind of makes me like sound like an old crotchety grandpa, but like,
no, which I understand, I love.
Yeah, so I like when a player runs it in for a touchdown and just kind of gives the ball back to the ref. Like, yeah,
act like you've been there before.
Like you've been here before. Exactly.
That's
what
right.
I was going to say. You took the words right out of my mouth. I kind of love that. Like, I kind of love that. And it speaks volumes, right? Instead of like all these celebrations and all these things. Yes, it keeps sports fun. And don't get me wrong, I love a good bat flip now and then. But like, I don't know. I kind of like the humbleness of like, yeah, I'm the shit and you should know it. And if you don't, you're going to know soon. And so,
Right.
And I feel like Caitlin Clark has been pretty mild about that. Yeah, she has a bit of vocality to her when it comes to calls she's not happy with. I think she can tone that down a little bit, and just kind of play the game. But I don't know. The Sky have been disappointing because all this discourse about them being bitter and then not saying anything to the media, but then tweeting later. And it's like, well, then just come out and say what you want to say to reporters. Don't hide behind your keyboard.
Right.
I don't know. It's making me sad to look at Twitter or X these days. Oh. It's just like, and then you saw what Pat McAfee said, and he called Caitlin Clark a white bitch. And I'm not surprised that he did that at all. Right. But also at the same time, it's like in the context, he should have chosen his words a little more delicately. I understand what he was getting at, but I think it was presented incorrectly.
Yes, agreed.
So yeah, it's been kind of sad, and I think a lot of media outlets are just capitalizing on having the content. Hey, was this a intentional, or like, was this kind of too aggressive? Is this a non-basketball foul? Yeah, it looked pretty intense to me, but you don't know what chirping was going on before that either.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It kind of makes me sad.
No, it is sad. It's very polarizing too, because of everything that you just explained. And of course, I won't even add a cherry on top. But again, this is with all of the different angles and the narratives that just come out about this, and everybody's just looking for that clickbait title. To me, is clickbait is trickbait, as I like to say. And it's one of those things where that's where the divide comes between people who, let's say, watch the WNBA for so many years, and then for those who jump on the bandwagon. And I understand if they have an opinion of it, that's fine. But then to the point where it's like they shouldn't come out and all of a sudden critique it to the point where it's like they really know what's going on. Yes, you see the video, you see what's happening here, but what led up to that? I'm sure there had to be something. Maybe there was some chirping going on earlier in the game, or maybe just a couple of minutes prior to that. And, for it to all of a sudden be deemed jealousy or, to make it a racial thing. I mean, it's just, it's just too much, at least for me. It's almost as if, can we just relax here? They're competitive people. They're obviously playing in the heat of the battle. And granted that was unnecessary. And then, of course, you have the other storylines where, now we have to protect Caitlin Clark. We got to get an enforcer on the team. It's almost as if, what is this, hockey in the 80s?
Yeah, what do we like a goon on the team now?
No, exactly. And listen, nobody loves more than a hockey fight than I do. But again, it's a different sport. And to me, it gets just way out of control when it comes to all the different narratives. And then, like you mentioned with McAfee saying what he said. And it's just too much.
It's a little distasteful, and it's just sad. And I just think that, did she need to get hip checked like that? No, she didn't. But also I think what people are forgetting or maybe letting go to the wayside is that these are young women. These are women that are in some places fresh out of college. This is their rookie season. They're not that experienced at this pro level. So they are going to sometimes let their anger rise to the top or get to the heat of the moment, like you said, and they're in battle. I get that. But they're also young, and they haven't had those experiences to be like, I used to be a hothead in the game, and now I'm not. You know what I mean? So I don't know. You kind of forget that, yes, they're professionals, and they're being paid professional salaries, but they're still pretty young.
Oh, yeah, of course. Now, a couple of things. I don't want to take too much more of your time. Listen, I could talk to you for hours on and just the back and forth has been tremendous. I know you mentioned hockey, obviously, with Columbus Blue Jackets. I'm sure you have your ties there, but of course we know they're not in the Stanley Cup Finals. Have you been following? Are you anticipating a final where you have, to me, the invisible superstar in a one Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers going up against the back-to-back now representing the Eastern Conference Florida Panthers? Any angles on how you feel that series is going to play out? Yeah,
I don't know. I kind of think that the Oilers have a real chance here, and I kind of like them. I have friends that have worked in the Panthers organization, so I'm kind of rooting for them too on the side. But I don't know. I think the Oilers could get it done, and there's nothing more exciting than playoff Stanley Cup final hockey, right? To me, that's more exciting than the NBA Finals. I don't know about you, but I just feel like hockey is so exciting, and I'd love to get to a point where the Blackhawks are in the mix again or the Blue Jackets.
Right.
It's been an interesting year in hockey. Was able to cover the NHL draft in June and see Connor Bedard get drafted to the Blackhawks and be able to ask him questions was really cool. And again, just a young, excited talent, right? And he's trying to build up the franchise back from where it was in, 2015 and way back when. And so, I don't know. I kind of like the Oilers. Long story short, I kind of like the Oilers, hoping to see a couple of teams get back in the mix in the future and build. Because for me, I don't know, hockey's kind of always been a couple teams too, right? And I'd like to see, like I said, with baseball, some other teams in the mix. What are your thoughts?
Well, I really think this series, I hope it's a long series. I hope it's entertaining. I don't think it's going to be that. If it goes 6 games, not to say I'd be surprised. I would think that the Panthers are going to win when it's all said and done. My thing is that, and as a teenager, I hated the Edmonton Oilers because I'm a New York Islander fan. And I couldn't stand Wayne Gretzky, Yari Curry, go on down the list. And now to think Connor McDavid, who is, in my opinion, he's the face of the face of the league, not franchise. Obviously, he's the face of the Edmonton Oilers. But for his chance to get here on this stage and to really make a mark as not only the game's best player, but the generation's best player.
Right.
I think it's going to be a tough task only because Florida, they're physical. They suffocate the ice. If you watch that Rangers series, the Rangers top players really couldn't get off. And the Panthers, they know what it takes to be in the Stanley Cup final, considering they were just there a year ago and they got beat by the Vegas Golden Knights. And I haven't chosen how many games it's going to be. Now I'm going to root hard for Edmonton, and I'm not a betting man. I would have to think the Panthers are going to win the series just based on what I've seen. And to me, Edmonton is like the old game show. Will the real Edmonton Oilers team please stand up? Because from one game to the next, you don't know what you're going to get. Think about the Vancouver series. They were down 3-2 going back in the conference semis, and you think, all right, could they win a game 6 in their building, considering now Vancouver? And they did. All right, fine. And then what happened? They won game 7. And just look at this last series where they were up 3 games. Oh, there was tied at 2, and it went to Dallas. So you're thinking, all right, the Stars will probably win. And then they win that game, and it's like, all right, is the real Edmonton Oilers team going to win a game 6, or they're going to lose and then go back to Dallas? And then it's so I don't know what teams
it lacks some consistency, right? But I think it'd be a cool story to see them win with McDavid. And the time was, 9 years since he's been to the finals. When I was in Columbus, Sergei Bobrovsky, who's now the goalie of the Panthers, was the Columbus goalie. So familiar with his style of play and his success as a Vezina Trophy winner. I don't know. I'd like to see just a good couple games, good couple matchups here. But I think the Oilers could surprise them. I don't know.
Oh, I think they could too. I mean, upset. No, and listen, they have enough firepower, so it's not as if they're the little engine that could by any means.
Sure.
But I think that if they are going to win this series, I would think they have to win one of the first 2 games here.
Yeah.
And preferably the first game, because always the second game could be tricky for the team that's on the road. And because they've had a same amount of layoff than the Panthers did, or just about a day off. But it's good because both teams will be rested. Both teams will be ready to go. It's not a thing where they just finished their series last night and the game is 48 hours from now. So, again, I'm rooting hard for Edmonton. But I don't know. Something tells me I think Florida, based on what I've seen here, they seem to be the team that's a little bit more complete. So
yeah, you're right. You're right about that. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, all right, Kacy, a couple of quickies before we go.
Sure.
Now, obviously, we talked about your path, your journey, etc. And, of course, you mentioned a couple of people that you've even interviewed. Who is a dream interview? Now, I understand as a sideline reporter and the player of the game or that person may get thrust right to you, which, of course, would be a dream. But if you had an opportunity to dream or to interview a player, it could be anybody for that matter, not just a player. It could be a coach, GM, etc. Who's that one person that you would just love to have the chance to have your microphone and stand in front of?
I love this question. I have to think about it. There's probably a lot of coaches I'd love to just interview. I think Ryan Day for Ohio State. I think he's intense, right? But I think he'd be I would love to interview him because he has. You saw him last season. He had like a lot of firepower and energy when he would do some interviews that he was really passionate about. And I think I would ask him questions that could bring that out of him. I think that'd be really cool. Player wise, that's tough. Man, I love that question. I'd love to interview like a legend who did play. Like it'd be
that's fine.
Cool, right? It'd be so cool to interview like, I don't know, Michael Jordan or like Dennis Rodman or like somebody who like doesn't play and doesn't do a lot of media interviews anymore. Right. Wouldn't that be cool? And like even last year I interviewed Eddie George because he's now the head coach at Tennessee State in the FCS. And that was cool because I was like, oh my gosh, he's a former Buckeye. Like he was huge. He had like a bodyguard next to him. So that was kind of like intense. But I don't know. I think it'd be really cool I treat every interview, like for me, it's like a Super Bowl to me. Like I'm like, I got to interview Kat Osterman, who's a very successful Olympian and softball player. And she's very tall. She's much taller than me, but she had a no-hitter in the softball game that I covered. And I got to interview her. So that was kind of one of those cool like career moments for me, especially in women's sports, to be able to interview her. But it's weird because you always think you're going to be like starstruck around these people, but like at the end of the day, you're like, you know what? They're just people too. And it's kind of cool to get on their level and just talk to them about who they are. And yeah, I still get nervous. Don't get me wrong. But I think the people that would make me the most nervous is like a Ryan Day or like a Michael Jordan, someone that just has like a different level of intensity or just history behind them. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. Any college football coach I think would be exciting to interview. I'd love to interview Mike McDaniel for the Dolphins.
Oh, yeah.
I just think he's so interesting and so fascinating.
Yeah.
He's just like a different kind of coach. And we're seeing a lot of
Right.
these NFL coaches kind of change the narrative for what is a coach. So, those were a couple.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, what about as far as being a sideline reporter, the event that you would love to cover the most? Like if you knew that, all right, Kacy, we're going to give you this assignment, which one would it be and that you would walk to, let alone fly to?
Yeah. Oh, the World Series. My gosh.
Oh, okay. Good.
No doubt. Just a World Series. I think a Big Ten championship game would be really cool in football or basketball. What else? Little League World Series, I think would be awesome. I don't know. I've always wanted to cover a Little League World Series or like a women's college World Series in softball. Just like those types of events where you're making an impact and you're making a difference, but you're also getting a chance to like shed light on these amazing athletes. That would be really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as making your mark as you are now, and of course, building up to that prior to from everything that you've detailed, who are some of the people in the business or in the industry from afar, maybe even from close up, that you've looked up to, that you've said, maybe I don't want to, maybe you haven't said I want to be like them, but from the certain angle, like you say, oh, wow, I would like to follow those footsteps or be similar to this particular person?
The first one that comes to mind is Jenny Taft, who works for Fox Sports. I've always liked her because I feel like we're similar in stature, and like I see myself in her, and her energy is like very lighthearted and fun, and I kind of consider myself that type of person too. I think it's important to like see representation on the job that you want, right? And so if you see someone that kind of looks and sounds like you, or that you could relate to, you're like, oh, I could do that. That seems really cool. And I just love how she presents herself on camera, and then her outfits, her energy, just the way she is with her team. She's someone I have spoken to once and definitely look up to in the industry. I think she brings a lot out of these players, and she brings a lot of value to the games that she covers. So Jenny Taft would be someone that I look up to in the industry. There's several. I mentioned Kate Scott. I think she's an incredible mentor and just kind of cheerleader in the industry. She wants people to be successful, and she wants that next level of women and men to be able to break that ceiling and keep going and keep doing these types of jobs. Kevin Burkhardt, who I know calls the Super Bowl now and does a lot of cool things with Fox. He's a friend of mine and has been kind of a great advocate for me in this business, and has watched my reels and, inspired me to keep going, because he's someone that got started in his, early 30s, was a car salesman before.
Yes.
And he's had those moments where he was like, should I just give up? Should I just not do this? And look where sticking it out has led. So, just inspired by a lot of people in this industry who have different paths and ways in. Those are a couple that come to mind, but I've had great coaches and mentors throughout my career so far. Carol Veroniak from ESPN has helped me with my reel and helped me get in touch with people that can help me. Jill Montgomery was a talent coach that I hired when I was first getting into the business. She used to work for ESPN as well, and she's built a successful business around training, reporters and analysts and play-by-play. So just a lot of good people like in my corner, just to have them as confidants and people to give advice and wisdom, because you really can't do this alone. You do need a support system, as I mentioned earlier.
Yes. And then in closing, the trajectory of where you're going, like you said, you studio reporter or sideline reporter, and knowing that obviously you want to have lengthened that and to continue to build to what you have. And I understand you may have answered this earlier, but I have to ask it in this fashion. What would you tell someone, whether it's a boy, girl, teenager, etc., that is trying to carve their path, or even someone that, like yourself, didn't have the formal training, did not go to the university? What would you tell that person in order for them to get to where it is that they want to go in this business, whether it be as a sideline reporter, studio host, podcaster, etc.?
Yeah. I would tell them, like, get your degree. It doesn't matter if it's because mine was in journalism, but it was more like the print side, I would say get your degree in whether it's business, journalism, broadcasting, whatever it might be, and just grind, just hustle. If you want to do this, you can do it. There is space for everyone. I will say that. but it's not for the faint of heart. And I know I mentioned that earlier. It's a tough business. It's hard to break into, and it's hard to stay in it because it's always changing. Right. It's a roller coaster. And I would just say to be where your feet are and appreciate the opportunities that you do have, because you never know who's watching.
That's right.
You never know who's listening. You never know who might be paying attention at the right time. And if you are kind on the way up and kind on the way down, no matter where you're at in the business, it makes a difference, because everybody in this business somehow knows each other, right? Everyone's been on, oh yeah, I was on his podcast, or I worked with him as, he was my producer for this, or he was my A2 or whatever it might be. Everybody knows everybody. So you can't kind of have that mentality of like, I'm better than everyone and I don't need these people, because word travels fast, and you want to be kind and you want to be humble, and it's easy to get like, let the fame get to you, or like the excitement of like, yeah, I'm the reporter, I'm the star. But for me, it's never been like that. It's always been a team effort. And I would encourage students and anyone trying to get into the business to remember that it takes a village. That's right. And you need everyone on the team to make you look and sound good. And because if my audio is not hooked up correctly, then I can't hear anything. And if my mic's not hooked up correctly, then I can't speak, into the microphone. And all of these roles matter. The producers, the directors, people that help you be set up for success, it matters. And so you kind of have to work as a team, be collaborative, be kind. Those are the kind of things that I would say, if you really want to get into this business, you got to have that foundation.
And that's a great landing point right there. Yeah. Kacy, thank you so much for your time. You were sensational. I truly appreciate it. All the success and best of luck to you. And yes, people, watch out for her, because especially I could see you getting that Major League Baseball job as a sideline reporter, saying to Ken Rosenthal, excuse me, there's some room for me here too. So yeah, I hope that's the case. Now. Yes. And I'm sure if they say, well, hey, you have to wear a bow tie, I'm sure you probably go out and buy a dozen.
I would. Ken's a legend. I met him at the winter meetings, and I said, Ken, where do you think Shohei is going to go? And he went, I have no earthly idea. That's what he said, but he's awesome. And thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and talk. I know I was blabbing on for a while, so I appreciate it. And I wish you all the success with your show. I can't wait to listen more and share your episodes.
Many thanks to Kacy Standohar, Fox Sports, ESPN, Big East Network, for joining me and sharing her story that I could share with you guys and gals. It was certainly an honor and pleasure to have her on here over the course of an hour plus, and hopefully she'll come back somewhere down the road where the trajectory of her career just continues to go up, up, and up in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. So one more time, thank you so much, Kacy, for stopping by, as well as you guys and gals for listening to what it is I have to say, or in this case, listening to this discussion with Kacy Standohar. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review on any podcast platform that you listen to, Apple, Spotify, of course, the YouTube channel for the visually inclined. I hope you got a chance to watch and certainly get the full experience there at JAYREELZ on YouTube. And if you want to hit me up with any questions, comments, suggestions, you could do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just a number, of course, on YouTube at JAYREELZ, or the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, a full-time content creator, as you know, with nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.